Hello, my name is Debra Scott, and I am a type 2 diabetic, officially in remission for almost 4 years. I will start off by saying that I'm not a doctor or healthcare professional. I'm not here to give medical advice. I'm just an ordinary mum and granny, sharing my journey and the information that helped me put my type 2 diabetes into remission and lose over 50 pounds in weight, both in a matter of months, and both I have maintained for 4 years. I keep pinching myself, but there is a very good reason for it, which I will go into over the course of this talk. I decided to make this video in the hope that sharing my story will help others. I put something together that I know would have helped benefited me when I was diagnosed. This is just my story, but there are countless others sharing their success too. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes and present a slideshow as well. I think visuals really help. The beauty of this being a video is that you can stop and start whenever you like, grab a drink, make notes, and basically just watch it whenever it suits you. It didn't take long to put my diabetes into reverse, and many could do the same. I've seen great results from people diagnosed just recently, last year, and even last century. Those on medication and those not. It really is possible. Type 2 diabetes is known as a chronic and progressive disease, but I quickly learned that it doesn't have to be. I'm only talking about type 2 diabetes and not type 1, which is very different. So this is me before my diagnosis on the left, and me after I had stopped eating what was making me put weight on and feel quite poorly on the right. I will start by giving you a little background information, what I feel led to my diagnosis, how I felt at the time, and what I did about it. Going back to the beginning of December 2017, I went to my doctor with some very worrying symptoms that I honestly thought could be something sinister. Severe, unrelenting heartburn for a few weeks. I hadn't had heartburn since I was pregnant, many years previous, and irritable bowel-like symptoms, so a mad dash for the loo. These aren't your normal type 2 diabetes symptoms, but looking back, I did have other issues, which would be associated with type 2 that I just put down to the menopause, with me being a lady of a certain age. Dry mouth, reoccurring yeast infections, blurry vision on a couple of occasions in the morning, and constant itchy skin. And these annoying little skin tags around my body, which I've since learned can be a sign of high blood sugar. That's not always the case, I hasten to add, but high blood sugars is apparently the most common cause. Mine were a lot smaller than these and not so condensed in one place, but I did have quite a few. Here are some other symptoms that can be associated with type 2 diabetes to be aware of. Feeling thirsty, feeling tired, always hungry, losing weight without trying, cuts or wounds that take longer to heal, passing more urine, dizziness, sexual problems, numbness or tingling in the hands or feet, nausea, mood swings, and sweet-smelling breath-like nail varnish or pill drops. So the doctor took my bloods and also arranged for a scan to see what was going on inside. The scan showed a fatty liver, and the blood results weren't good either. In fact, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes with a HbA1c of 62. HbA1c test is basically a blood test showing how sugary your blood has been over the previous 3 months. As you can see from this slide, anything over 47 is diabetic, so I was well into the diabetic range and probably had been for some time. I was so upset and scared for the future, and also angry with myself as I felt it was my fault. I'd brought it on myself, letting myself become overweight over the years. Although I did work and I had 2 children to take care of, when they went to bed, I was definitely a couch potato, not exercising. I later learned not to blame myself. So why was it not my fault? Well, my body had started to struggle dealing with the amount of sugar I was eating. And what it couldn't deal with, it was storing as fat. It was very clear much of that was around my tummy area because I had a Michelin tire, and the fat was obviously around my liver, as the scan had confirmed. I do have a genetic link too, as I have many family members with type 2 diabetes. That said, type 2 is mostly due to diet and not genetics. But I didn't really have a sweet tooth, so my diagnosis really confused me. Yes, I enjoyed a bar or 2 of chocolate, who doesn't? But apart from that and an occasional dessert, not much by way of sugary food or drink for that matter. I was a tea and coffee drinker and not into fizzy drinks at all, but all was to become clear. Regarding the HbA1c blood test, it's good to know your number. Obviously, if it's higher than where it needs to be, the earlier you find out, the better. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. My nurse wanted to start me on metformin, and statins were also mentioned. My blood pressure was very high too. Borderline for medication, in fact, with both readings in the red zone. My top line was over 140 and my bottom line was over 90. I didn't have any symptoms, but it is possible to have high blood pressure without knowing it. I was about 25 kilograms overweight, so about 4 stone, and the nurse encouraged me to lose weight as this would be very beneficial. Believe me, I've been to various slimming clubs over the years. I've done the 1,000-calorie diet, the egg, the grapefruit, the cabbage soup diets, and you name it, I've done it. I worked in a big office for 30 years where such diets circulated on a weekly basis. Yes, I lost a stone here and there, but I never maintained the weight loss. I always regained it, and a bit more besides. But I was going to give this my best shot because now my health was at stake. Exercise was encouraged too, which I completely get. For me, this was uncharted territory, apart from getting a few steps in now and again occasionally. Speaking of exercise, I am aware that you can't outrun a bad diet. Basically, you can't eat rubbish and expect to just burn it off exercising. Your bad diet will catch up with you. I had read somewhere that type 2 diabetes could be reversed, so I asked my nurse for 2 months to try a change in diet. I didn't know what that was going to be, as I felt I ate quite healthily: wholemeal bread, rice, pasta, jacket potatoes, cereals with all the healthy symbols on the packets, and I love bananas and often had 2 for a working lunch. And I always went for the low-fat options with food. Soon, all would become very clear. My nurse agreed to this and went through what I should and shouldn't eat. Understandably, sugary foods, cakes, biscuits, sweets, and fizzy drinks were to be avoided. After all, type 2 diabetes is basically an intolerance to sugar. A balanced diet was the key, low on the fat, red meat, and salt. This was all explained in the booklets I got to take home. This is the NHS Eat Well plate, here to guide us on how to eat to maintain our health. A balanced diet approach. Lots of starchy carbohydrates on the right, for example, bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes. Lots of fruit and vegetables on the left. Low fat, low salt, little red meat, and dairy towards the bottom. It's basically a one-size-fits-all, or the majority of us anyway. But we are also individual. This just isn't going to work for everyone. It needs to be adjusted according to the individual and their health issues, especially if the person is overweight, has pre-diabetes, or type 2 diabetes, basically where insulin resistance has kicked in. What exactly is insulin resistance? Insulin is the hormone that regulates the sugar and glucose in the body. When someone has become insulin resistant, it means that the insulin isn't able to do its job effectively. Much of the sugar that it struggles to deal with gets stored as fat. Insulin is known as the fat storage hormone. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I discovered the adjustments that worked so well for me and for so many others that have struggled with their weight and blood glucose levels. So back to my story. I came away from my appointment an emotional wreck, completely devastated and incredibly worried. I worried for the future as I saw what my mum went through. She was diagnosed type 2 diabetic around the same age as me, in fact, and went straight on the medication, ending up injecting insulin. She had all sorts of health issues: high blood pressure, kidney problems. She suffered a stroke. She had neuropathy. For example, when she trapped her fingers in my car door, she felt nothing. And when the nurse prodded her feet, she couldn't really feel it. Bad circulation, sores on her legs that wouldn't heal, the community nurse having to come round most days to dress them. She was registered blind in her late 60s, which was the saddest thing of all to witness. She had a hiatus hernia, diverticulitis. In fact, you name it, she had it. Despite all her medication for the diabetes, the condition continued to get worse. The medication didn't seem to be helping. I also felt ashamed. There is a stigma attached to being diabetic, I feel, a fat and lazy label. I didn't tell anyone apart from close family members for weeks. I went home, and after I'd stopped sobbing in my husband's arms, I turned to Google. Just 2 words: reversing diabetes, and it took me to diabetes.co.uk and its fabulous forum with so many worldwide success stories, so inspirational, those with diabetes themselves offering support and first-hand knowledge. The online support is invaluable. And here is just one of the many inspirational stories springing to life. This is Mark, who lost 9 stone and saw his HbA1c go from 87 to 28. He's one of many superstars on the forum, a mine of information that he happily shares on a daily basis. He's just one of a multitude of people that supported and guided me back to full health and who support others on their journeys. It's basically a 24/7 helpline, more or less, where you can talk about your concerns with other diabetics and your questions are answered, no matter how trivial you think they may be. I joined a few online groups as well. It felt good being part of a community where everyone understood what you were going through. Nurses, doctors, and healthcare professionals have only got so many hours in their day, and obviously COVID has brought them even more challenges. Here are some more great results. On the left, the figures show just what can be done with both weight loss and controlling blood sugars. These figures were taken from the signature panels of the forum members, who are more than happy to share to help and motivate others. On the right is Yvonne, who lost just short of 7 stone, losing almost 43% of her body weight, and went from a HbA1c of 109 to 31. An unexpected bonus for her was that her lifelong problem with migraines just disappeared. Here are a few other forum members with similar results, all achieved in a relatively short space of time. Everyone has a story to tell on the forum. Carol on the left, who has 3 younger siblings, all with type 2, brought her HbA1c down from 97 to 39 with an almost 5 stone weight loss. She'd been overweight most of her life. Michelle on the right, on diagnosis, was put on diabetes medication and followed the low fat, low calorie advice, but ended up with an even higher HbA1c. Then she discovered a better alternative for her. No medication at all these days and 4.5 stone lighter. The signature panels of the forum members had so many encouraging statistics in: HbA1c plummeting, incredible weight loss, blood pressure normalizing, migraines disappearing, no more sleep apnea, gout or foggy brain, improvements to long-term chronic pain conditions like arthritis and fibromyalgia, and many people noting significant improvements through their asthma and eczema, and so much more. I was amazed, to be honest. So much so, I started to put together a list. And here it is. So what was the advice from the experts, the diabetics themselves, that would put my condition into reverse? Lower your carb intake, in a nutshell. And it was the same on every diabetic forum I visited, including advice from the members on the NHS diabetes website. Why low carb? Because all carbs turn to sugar, and we are basically sugar intolerant. Even savoury foods are broken down into glucose, so foods like bread, brown or white, pasta, rice, potatoes can all turn into a lot of sugar. In fact, if you chew bread long enough, it begins to taste sweet. They also said don't be afraid of eating healthy natural fats. Not all fats are bad for us. In fact, many can be very beneficial for reasons which I will go into in more detail shortly. And they advise to avoid ultra-processed foods. These foods go through a lot of processes before ending up in their packaging in the shops. Lots of ingredients are added. One of the main ingredients is sugar, which can be hidden under a multitude of different names, over 100 I believe, and it can be difficult to spot. Many other undesirable ingredients as well, like additives, artificial colours, flavours and preservatives. You'll usually see a long list of ingredients on the packaging. Many you won't even be able to pronounce. If you don't recognise the ingredients from what you have in your own kitchen, it's probably ultra-processed. The less ingredients, the better. 5 or less is optimal. And jars too. Here is just one example. Even the company behind Dolmio have in the past warned its products should not be consumed more than once a week. I use ordinary tin tomatoes now and add my own herbs and spices, much cheaper alternative too. So lowering carbs makes perfect sense to me, but I needed to learn which were good for me and which were bad, which I could just cut down on, and if there was any I needed to cut out. These brilliant infographics can be found on the Public Health Collaboration website. They make the amount of sugar in food very clear. The brainchild of an amazing doctor, Dr. David Unwin, who is a Southport GP. You may have heard about him or seen him in the papers, or maybe on TV. He has now seen well over 100 patients into medication-free remission in about 8 years and helped people regain their health all over the world. As if that isn't enough, he saved tens of thousands of pounds every year, which he returns to the Treasury. Imagine the amount that could be saved if every surgery offered low-carb advice. He became a GP in 1986. At that time, he had 57 type 2 diabetic patients and says then diabetes was known as a disease of the elderly, and it was quite rare. Fast forward to 2012, and in the same population, he had 472 type 2 diabetics, and patients were getting younger and younger. His youngest patient was just 10. And he found that the medication he was prescribing wasn't actually making patients better. 2 decades of giving the standard advice, but no patients in remission. But he didn't question that, as it was, after all, known as a progressive disease. He stumbled across low carb when one of his patients came into his surgery. He didn't recognise her due to her vast weight loss. Her blood test results confirmed that the patient was in remission with a non-diabetic HbA1c. He asked them how they'd done it. The patient had lowered their carb intake, as simple as that. His fastest case of reversal is just 38 days. More and more surgeries are offering low carb advice now, as the results are staggering, with so many health benefits, but especially so for weight loss and type 2 remission. Dr. Unwin's graph here explains what to do very clearly. If you don't put so much sugar into your body or the medication you might be on won't have to deal with it. It's a balance of sugar in, sugar out. It also highlights alternative methods of putting type 2 in remission, like bariatric surgery, a very low calorie diet, no good if you were a thin type 2, and certainly not sustainable way of eating, but beneficial in the short term. It also mentions fasting. Again, this is not for everyone, but it can be very effective. I calculated I was eating around 300 grams of carbs a day on average before my diagnosis. To put that in perspective, 4 grams of carbs equals around 1 teaspoon of sugar. So my body was dealing with an awful lot of sugar every single day. No wonder I ended up diabetic. I probably eat around 30 to 50 grams of carbs a day now, and often less. I note that many people do well with a daily intake of 130 grams of carbs a day or a little less. But for me, it makes all the difference to my blood sugars if I go lower. As a type 2 diabetic, the less sugar in my body, the less it has to deal with, the better. Same for all diabetics, in fact. I will go into the better choices for low carb food and drink, including alcohol, shortly. Prior to my diagnosis, my day would often start off with a bowl of cereal, sometimes a cocktail of cereals, topped off with all bran, thinking all that was healthy, maybe some slices of banana on top, and low-fat milk, of course. I would have some wholemeal toast with marmalade and some fruit juice maybe at the weekend. With all those healthy symbols on the cereal packets, how could they possibly be bad for me? When I look at the boxes now and see just how much sugar is in cereal, it saddens me. On the box, they say an average portion is 30 grams in weight, but that doesn't really amount to much when you put it in a bowl. I imagine very few have that small amount. As I said earlier, I had a cocktail of cereals, thinking it was a healthy way to start the day. I'm very good at reading nutritional information now in the supermarket, as long as I've got my reading glasses with me, that is. Doomed if I forgot them, as the writing is so small. I'm sure they do it on purpose. I find the large supermarket websites are great for clear nutritional info. You can check things out from the comfort of your own home. This was the rice I used to eat, long grain and 2 minutes in the microwave. The information on the right is what you would see on the supermarket website. It shows the nutritional information for half the packet, 35 grams of carbs. This next bit is really important. In the UK, it's the total carbs that need to be counted, not the of which sugars, as all carbs turn to sugar. I used to eat the whole packet, which totals 70 grams of carbs. That's a lot of sugar, and that's without adding my curry, my naan bread, onion bhaji, and mango chutney. I avoid rice now and have cauliflower rice instead. You can see on the right of the screen, it's a fraction of the sugar, just 2.6 grams per portion, so less than 1 teaspoon of sugar. I buy frozen for ease because I like a simple life. 4 bags for £2 from most large supermarkets, 4 minutes in the microwave and it's ready. Mix it with herbs, garlic, spices or veg if you like. Some like it hot and I love mine with chilies. One of the biggest surprises came with sausages. The difference between the lowest and highest carb content was staggering. Richmond used to be my favourite, but I go for a meaty one now, 97% meat and little impact on my blood sugars. Richmond are about 42% meat and the rest is made up of all sorts of ingredients, including rusk and wheat starch, which turns into a lot of sugar. Choosing well can make all the difference to blood sugar control and weight loss. If you're vegan or vegetarian, you can just Google low carb options. You can't go wrong eating real food, just like your grandparents and their parents before them. Avoid anything that comes in a packet with a long list of ingredients as much as possible, basically. Low carb doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. I shop at Aldi or Lidl much of the time. I throw the fresh ingredients into a slow cooker, wok or baking tray, add garlic, herbs and spices to my taste. I'm not brilliant in the kitchen, a bit of a lazy cook to be honest, but what I make is super tasty and my family love it. You can ask Alexa how many carbs are in certain foods. You can go onto the internet. I use the Carbs and Cals app, and I've found that the Diet Doctor website is brilliant. Much of the information is free as well. It has great infographics like these. This slide compares above ground vegetables to below ground. Basically, your below ground veg turns into a lot more sugar. For example, potatoes, carrots, parsnips, and turnips. Some fruits are sweeter than others, especially the tropical fruits. And if you eat a lot of fruit, this can make a big impact. Fruit is known as nature's candy, in fact, and fruit juice contains more sugar than you probably think. I was really surprised. One average glass of orange juice equals around 3 oranges, which I don't think many would eat in one go. One medium orange has around 10 grams of carbs in, so basically an 8-ounce glass of orange juice can contain over 6 teaspoons of sugar. Nuts are great, again, some better than others. Cashews are very carb heavy, whereas macadamia nuts are not. But nuts, I find, can be a bit addictive. Here are the real baddies for those who are metabolically challenged. Bread, potatoes, pasta, rice, cereals, cakes and biscuits. There is some good news, some great choices in the alcohol section. If you do like a gin and tonic, gin is 0 carb, as are many other spirits, but just pair up with a low or no sugar mixer. I myself don't drink spirits, but I do enjoy a glass of red wine, dry white wine or Prosecco. Champagne is also on the good list for those whose budgets stretch that far. So how did I know which food was good for me and which wasn't? The forum members' advice was to test different foods with a blood glucose monitor for about a month, see which spiked me and avoid or reduce portion size accordingly, and keep a food diary. We're all different, it's not one size fits all, hence testing can be extremely beneficial. I did end up buying one online for less than £20, which came with some testing strips and lancets. Best investment I've ever made, to be honest, and some companies do offer free monitors with their starter packs. You may be able to borrow one from your GP surgery. I do know mine offer this facility, but I'm also aware that it isn't the case in all doctor surgeries. If you don't have access to a monitor for whatever reason, you can just lower your carb intake and that will help enormously. On the left is a guide to blood glucose testing. This was kindly put together by one of the moderators from diabetes.co.uk. I tested first thing in the morning to see what my fasting blood glucose was, also before I ate and 2 hours after. I followed the diabetic's advice, and if it was over 2 points higher than where I started, I looked closely at what I'd eaten and adjusted portion sizes. I kept a food diary of the results. Some foods sent my blood sugar so high that I felt it was best to avoid. Constant spikes and raised blood glucose levels can lead to organ damage and diabetic complications. I popped all the readings into an app called My Sugar, which gives an estimated HbA1c, so you can see if you're heading in the right direction. The worst culprits for me were in fact starchy carbs like bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, and even some fruit. They sent my blood sugars really high. I now call grapes sugar bombs and bananas sugar sticks and avoid them. I find berries are best as they don't have much of an impact at all. We're all different though, and that's why testing is so beneficial. Once you get the gist of how certain foods impact on you, you won't need to do the testing so often, and you can get a very good idea in 3 to 4 weeks. I do still test regularly though, because I find it keeps me motivated, and I like to know I'm still in control of the diabetes and it hasn't started to take back control. This is a Libra Sensor. They're great inventions, basically a small sensor that sticks on your arm, but gives 24/7 blood glucose readings. You can check your level by scanning with a reader, or alternatively by using your mobile phone. The readings show up as graphs. It's pure genius. I'll be showing some of my graphs shortly. Anyone can buy a sensor, not cheap, it's around £50, and they only last for 2 weeks. but just buying one would tell you so much about how your body is dealing with the food you are eating during the day and also what happens during the night. Especially good for highlighting what your body is struggling with, so you can help yourself by making a few small but significant changes. It's worth mentioning here that Freestyle Libra have been offering a 2-week free trial for diabetics for some time. Terms and conditions do apply. You don't have to be diabetic to buy one. Great for non-diabetics too. I have to self-fund. I buy direct from the Libra website, or sometimes from my local chemist. Some diabetics can get these on prescription, but not usually type 2s. If you are diabetic, you'll get the VAT deducted. If you're thinking about using one, you don't need to buy a reader, as you can use your mobile phone as long as it's compatible, and you can check this out on the Freestyle Libra website. I realised the higher the amount of carbs I was eating, the higher the reading. I changed my way of eating according to the results. Within a few days, my symptoms had subsided. No heartburn, no IBS, no dry mouth, no blurry vision, and not one yeast infection since, and it's now over 4 years. Here are some of the results I got from using my continuous blood glucose monitor, some real eye-openers. This was just a medium-sized jacket potato weighing 300 grams with a little butter, a significant rise, and it gave me quite a shock. It was my first test too. A jacket potato this size equates to around 60 grams of carbs, so 15 teaspoons of sugar or thereabouts for my body to deal with. On the left is 2 slices of the ordinary wholemeal bread that I used to eat, 18 grams of carbs per slice, so a total of around 36 grams, which equates to around 9 teaspoons of sugar. On the right is a low carb alternative, 2 slices totaling under 8 grams of carbs, 2 teaspoons of sugar, so a massive difference. Selecting low carb bread really made a difference to my blood glucose levels. There were a few better options on the left, and on the right, a photo of some homemade bread rolls using a Diet Doctor recipe. We had a little dabble with baking in our household during the lockdowns. By we, I mean my husband, who discovered he has brilliant cooking and baking skills. He really is a master baker. His speciality is lemon drizzle cake and chocolate fudge cake, using a little sucre gold, which is a natural sweetener, instead of sugar, and almond flour instead of flour. The sucre gold doesn't leave an aftertaste like other sweeteners can, I find, and it doesn't raise my blood sugars as some can. And if you aren't into baking, you can actually do a 60-second low-carb chocolate mug cake. Basically, throw the ingredients into a mug, into the microwave for a minute. It hits the spot when you fancy a bit of chocolate. Other options too, like vanilla and peanut butter, for example. There's lots of great recipes out there. And for a quick chocolate fix, I have a box of choc and nut bars in at home, just 5.9 grams of carbs per bar, great with a nice cup of tea, a quick breakfast or lunch on the go. Chocolate isn't out of bounds. Who doesn't love a bit of chocolate? 85% and above is a good option for me, as I find I can't overeat it. Just a couple of pieces is enough. I do like Tesco's Chocologic 90% dark chocolate, although it does contain sweetener. There is a downside to sweeteners. They can up your appetite and potentially maintain your cravings for sweet food. As a comparison to savoury food, I've included a slide of my experience of just one donut. I didn't eat all of these, just the one. There's a second spike. You can see that my insulin seems to struggle to deal with the donut, and it looks like it had to call for extra troops to help out. Here I ate an average portion of rice, no significant rise, but it took a while to come back down. As you can see on the right of the slide, it's 6 hours in fact. Similar happened with this small portion of pasta, but it took even longer to come back down, about 7 hours. This was just one medium sliced banana. For these tests, I didn't eat again until my blood sugars came back down. In the real world, both diabetics and non-diabetics are encouraged to eat regularly, to include plenty of fruit, so blood sugars remain constantly high. High blood sugar levels, especially when prolonged, can lead to complications. What stands out here is the roller coaster you're on when lots of carbs are eaten throughout the day. Insulin, the fat storage hormone, keeps having to come out to deal with it every time you eat or drink. At the bottom is the low carb way of eating. Insulin is pretty much redundant. It keeps you off that roller coaster. The less insulin knocking around, the less chance of storing fat. There have been various studies that confirm constant ups and downs in blood glucose, which they refer to as the Big Dipper, can leave you feeling tired and hungry and eating more, like this slide shows. It can leave you with intense sugar cravings, mood swings, difficulty focusing, low energy levels. So what exactly is happening here? You eat a high carb meal, blood sugar spikes, insulin has to come out to deal with the sugar, it brings the sugar crashing down and leaves you feeling flat and like you need more carbs to make you feel better. It's a vicious cycle. And this ride doesn't just last 2 to 3 minutes, it lasts all day long every time you eat this way. Carbohydrates are what fuel the roller coaster. A typical example is eating a Chinese buffet, then feeling hungry an hour later. And here is my typical day on low carb. Basically avoiding ultra-processed food and starchy carbs like pasta, rice, bread, potato. I avoid flour-based products like pastry, cakes, biscuits, and battered food. And I don't eat shop-bought cereal anymore. For breakfast, I have kippers, peppered mackerel, yogurt with berries or granola, some ham and cheese, eggs any which way, and my new favourite is a chaffle, basically a waffle made with egg and cheese. I love them with smoked salmon or crispy bacon. Easy to make in my waffle maker, which cost me £10. I love my omelette maker too. It makes the perfect fluffy omelette whilst I get myself ready for the day ahead. If I'm not hungry, I just have a coffee. It was the Kellogg's brothers that said breakfast was the most important meal of the day. A cunning marketing slogan indeed. I used to be on autopilot thinking I had to eat breakfast, lunch and dinner, and now I just eat when I'm hungry. For lunch or dinner, I eat all kinds of meat, fish, vegetables, salad, nuts, cheese, cream, eggs, olives, avocado. I eat certain fruits. I just make better choices. For me, berries are best. Sauces can be a minefield. There are very good choices and very bad choices, sugar content wise. If you like a bit of tomato ketchup, there is a no added sugar option. I much prefer brown sauce. And again, there is a reduced sugar option. I love my mustard, and this I find doesn't affect me at all. What also surprised me was the amount of sugar in drinks. So my advice would certainly be think before you drink. This is just the sugar in Coke, but the same applies to many drinks, especially so for the energy drinks. The low carb way of eating has hardly any impact on my blood glucose levels, and it keeps my insulin pretty much redundant. No spikes, I rarely feel hungry, no torturous cravings, no desire to snack, no calorie counting. And when I got my head around how many carbs were in different foods, no carb counting either. I tend to only eat twice a day. Before my diagnosis, I was on autopilot, 3 meals a day, snacks in between, eating breakfast, planning lunch, eating lunch, planning dinner. I have a different relationship with food now. I'm not superhuman. I've had bad days. I've learned I can't have nutty milk chocolate in my cupboards. I've learned that at Christmas, the tradition of having celebration chocolates hanging around the house had to go. I've learned that I can make bad choices when I've had too much wine. But the thing is, I put those days behind me and I move on. I also learned a lot about my body. It's very common for type 2 diabetics to have what's called dawn phenomenon, which basically means our blood sugars are usually higher when we wake up in the morning. The liver thinks we're starving and throws out some glucose thinking it's helping matters. So having a breakfast high in carbs like the one I used to have will only make blood sugars even higher. So if I have a breakfast, I usually stick to a very low carb one. For example, scrambled eggs, maybe with some smoked salmon, or cheese and ham omelette, quick and convenient, fridge to face in 5 minutes. I love kippers and peppered mackerel. Greek yogurt with a few nuts and berries, a slice of low carb toast with homemade jam. If I'm not hungry, I just have a coffee. I eat healthy fats. At the beginning, I wasn't aware there was such a thing as healthy fats. Not so. There are lots of healthy fats. As examples of the healthy natural fats I eat, fish, meat, cheese, eggs, avocado, olives, yogurt, nuts, butter, cream, and even chocolate. I cook with butter, olive oil, or coconut oil, nothing ultra-processed. I found alternative foods for the starchy carbs and did myself a swaps list. What worked for me, and to be honest, what would work for most type 2 diabetics to give better control of blood sugars, and also for those wanting to lose a few pounds or just generally feel better in themselves. And of course, for those wanting to steer away from becoming diabetic, those in the pre-diabetic boat. On the left are the swaps that keep my blood sugars under control and some idea of what I eat in a week on the right. There are many online sites that offer weekly or monthly low carb meal planners too, and a quick Google will take you to them. Low carb is very good for weight loss. How? Well, your body uses carbs for energy, and when you lower your carb intake, it starts to use fats for energy instead. It's as simple as that, or as simple as fat. This slide basically shows you the impact on blood sugars from carbs, the highest rise, protein, medium rise, and fats, hardly any rise. So eating healthy fats as a diabetic can be very beneficial. I find they keep me full for longer, so particularly good for weight loss. Freshwell GP Surgery has one of the best low carb sections I've come across on a GP surgery website. It includes meal planners and a brilliant, easy to use app for your mobile phone. So much useful information in the palm of your hand. Diet Doctor, one of my favourite sites for up-to-date information, videos, recipes. There are meal plans too. I especially love their visual section. I Googled my favourite meals and desserts and added low carb for some fantastic recipes. I try to drink lots of water. It has so many health benefits. I usually add lemon for taste. When I returned to my nurse 2 months later, I'd lost 2 stone. My HbA1c was down from 62 to 47, so in the pre-diabetic range. I was no longer hiding my diagnosis from friends and family and was indeed telling everyone, telling them that there is hope. Type 2 diabetes doesn't have to be progressive. I think of type 2 mainly as a lifestyle disease, and it needs a lifestyle change to combat it. This is me, last minute as usual, packing for my holidays to Portugal on the 12th of February 2018. I tried my holiday clothes on. Everything was hanging off me. Had to do a mad dash to the shops to get a whole new wardrobe, much to my delight. I was weighing every day, in fact. I still do weigh most days. It's not for everyone, but it suits me. I like to keep my eye on things. I stopped weighing myself when my mum passed away 14 years ago, as it no longer seemed important. That wasn't one of my best decisions, to be honest. I love my digital smart scale because it gives me so much information and all in the palm of my hand on my mobile phone. It tracks so much more than just weight. I find it really motivational. It cost me about £20 and it's so easy to use. Another appointment with my diabetes nurse on the 2nd of May, and my HbA1c was in the normal range, 41, with a £42 weight loss. I really was on a roll. My fat was literally melting away. 28th of June 2018, I reached a £50 weight loss. I felt fabulous, down from a size 18 to 20 to a size 12, and officially in remission. I found my old self-confidence and a lot more energy. I felt empowered with this knowledge that I knew I could help so many others with, and I wanted to share it. So going from not even wanting to admit I was diabetic, I was shouting it from the rafters. I joined my surgery patient participation group. My practice manager has been amazing, as have the diabetic team there. Big shout out to them for helping me to put together a leaflet for patients who wanted to lose weight or control blood sugars the low carb way. I was given a room to hold patient-to-patient support sessions. I took a suitcase full of books, leaflets, food and drink with me and set out a display showing the equivalent sugars. This really helped the patients to understand. But it was like moving home every week, I can tell you. My practice manager helped to sort rooms in the community out for me too, to do talks. I even did a talk to the tinnitus group at my local hospital. Diabetes can affect every part of the body, even down to the hearing. My favourite talk was on the Blackpool Tower Ballroom stage. I knew I wouldn't get there for my dancing, that's for sure. This was my table display on the day. I started to go further afield, but then COVID struck and I had to continue via Zoom. I was invited to do a talk as far away as Australia. I didn't even have to pack a suitcase. Talking of COVID, I caught it very early on. As soon as antibody tests became available, I started testing. I really just wanted to confirm if what I had was COVID, as I suspected. My first test was May 2020 and it was positive. And as you can see, my antibodies are still going strong. I've not had a sniffle since, thankfully. Illness can put blood sugars up, and mine was way up when I was poorly with COVID. Stress can too, as I can see on my continuous glucose monitor. For example, when I'm doing talks, I get very nervous. Sleepless nights are a culprit also, so a good night's sleep is important. Unfortunately, uncontrolled blood sugars can affect sleep. and lack of sleep can make us make poor dietary choices the next day. De-stressing is very important, especially during challenging times. Not always possible or easy to do. We all have our own ways of de-stressing. For me, I like nothing more than going for a walk. It gets me away from my laptop and off my mobile phone. I go out into the fresh air. I feel even better when the sun's out, topping up my vitamin D and improving immunity function. Talking is always a good mood lifter too. It's good to talk. There's an app for everything, it seems, and many recommend this one called Headspace. On the forum, I put out the feelers to see if anyone wanted to get together to bring our big pants, showing our weight loss, and share our success stories. My husband would take photos and we would try to get them into the media in the hope of helping others. Diabetes.co.uk press office spotted my post and wanted to assist. They arranged a room in Birmingham, as that was a central location, and sent their photographer, videographer, and interviewers who spent the day with us, capturing photographs like this one, which I feel sums up the day perfectly. A day full of fun, laughter, and inspiration. As a result, we have been in many newspapers and magazines, sharing our stories and giving hope to other diabetics. I was even invited to share the sofa with Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield on This Morning. I can't even put into words just how nervous I was. I felt like a rabbit in the headlights, but it was all in a good cause. I was hoping we would be invited, all of us would be invited, but obviously there wasn't enough space around the table, even though between us we had lost a shed load of weight. And last, but certainly not least, I would like to introduce you to my wonderful husband, Eric. If he had £1 for every time I've mentioned the word diabetes, he would be a multi-millionaire. He himself lost over 20 pounds by just lowering his carbs. He isn't diabetic, but needed to lose some weight as his blood pressure was elevated. His blood pressure reduced significantly within a few days, as you can see by this graph taken from an app on his mobile phone. I put my diabetes into reverse within weeks by following a low carb way of eating. I don't call it a diet because on all the diets I've done in my lifetime, and I think I probably covered the majority, I've not been able to get food off my mind, and I felt constantly hungry and deprived. I didn't sustain the weight loss for long either, ended up putting it all back on, but not so with low carb. All my health markers are optimal too, including cholesterol. I call low carb my miracle cure and my diagnosis a blessing in disguise, going from being ashamed to tell anyone I was diabetic because of the stigma attached to literally telling the world. An important note on exercise. Exercise can be extremely beneficial. I've gone from a walk after eating and seen my blood sugars come down. It's good for general well-being, but for some it's not always possible for various reasons. The good thing to remember is that a few small but significant changes to your diet can bring down weight and your HbA1c without the need to exercise. I'd just like to add one very important thing. If you are thinking of trying the low carb way of eating and are on any medication, be that for diabetes, blood pressure, or anything else for that matter, I'd advise you to work very closely with your doctor or healthcare professional. For one thing, the medication will most probably need to be reduced accordingly as you go along, to make sure you are not taking more than the new way of eating requires. I've seen many reducing and even coming off all medication, even insulin. And this includes people who have been diabetic for a long time, as I said earlier. So this point is very important. And finally, the message I hope you will take home today is that type 2 diabetes does not have to be progressive. It can indeed be put into reverse. Patient choice is essential and low carb advice very important. Low carb is endorsed by the NHS. There is an award-winning low carb programme that is recommended by the NHS that offers one-to-one support. More details can be found on diabetes.co.uk website. You may be eligible for a referral to the programme from your healthcare professional. For anyone wanting some inspiration to lose weight and get healthier, check out over 600 inspirational stories section on Diet Doctor. It's a wonderful website packed full of great resources. And also the many success stories shared on diabetes.co.uk forum, of course. Here are some of the books that I can highly recommend. My absolute favourite is the Diabetes Weight Loss Cookbook, written by Katie and Giancarlo Caldesi, with a foreword from Dr. David Unwin. Easy to understand explanation of what type 2 diabetes is, how to deal with it, and includes lots of helpful visuals and great recipes. And lots more recommendations here. I've listed them all on this slide as well, so you get a better idea. Many films, videos, and podcasts too. If you only watch one of these, please make sure it's the TED Talk by the amazing Dr. Sarah Hallberg. Here's a few of my favourite social media sites and apps that have helped me enormously. And here are some fabulous websites. The beauty of making this video is that you, the viewer, can pause to take notes whenever and wherever you like. I've used several blood glucose monitors. My current one is a GlucoNavi, but they've all been good. The test strips can be expensive, but as I said earlier, testing for just 3 to 4 weeks will be really helpful. And some have special offer codes to look out for. I will leave you with some favourite quotes from diabetes.co.uk forum members. A lovely way to finish, I feel. I have no commercial connection with anything I've recommended in this presentation. The information I've shared is literally just what helped me and gave me hope. I certainly wish I'd seen something similar when I was diagnosed. So thank you for listening, and I really hope that sharing my journey has helped in some small way.